What if everything you thought you knew about Game of Thrones was just the surface of a much darker truth? The real story lies buried in the shadows, ancient secrets that completely change how you'll see the entire series. Tonight, we'll uncover the shocking truth that George R.R. Martin has been hiding in plain sight all along. The White Walkers aren't the villains you think they are. Rhaegar's victory would have doomed the realm more than his defeat. And the doom of Valyria. It wasn't just a natural disaster. It was something far more terrifying. These aren't just fan theories. They're the missing pieces that make the entire story finally make sense. As the night deepens around you, prepare to discover the hidden patterns connecting everything from the 5 forts of distant Essos to the weirwood dreams of the Starks. Revelations that will forever change how you see this world of ice and fire. The most dangerous secrets aren't found in battles or politics, but in the whispers of prophecies thousands of years old, still shaping destinies today. Our journey begins in the deepest past, with the foundational forces that created this world, before traveling through time to explore how these ancient powers continue to ripple through the ages, influencing kingdoms, prophecies, and the paths not taken. By the end, nothing will seem the same again. Theory 1. The 5 Forts, ancient barrier against unspeakable horror hidden in plain sight. The mysterious 5 forts in northeastern Essos were not built by the Yetish Pearl Emperor, but were an earlier, failed Valyrian endeavor to quarantine a magical blight or hostile entities emerging from the Grey Waste, a project abandoned before the Valyrian freehold's prime. In the distant northeastern reaches of Essos stand the 5 forts, colossal structures of fused black stone that predate even the Golden Empire of Yeti. Legend attributes their construction to the Pearl Emperor, built to defend against the demons of the Lion of Night. However, the distinctive fused black stone architecture bears a striking resemblance to Valyrian craftsmanship, prompting speculation of their involvement, though this is often dismissed due to the fort's apparent antiquity predating the Valyrian freehold's zenith. This theory proposes that the 5 forts were indeed an early Valyrian undertaking, perhaps by an exploratory faction, or during a nascent phase of their empire, long before their dominion was consolidated. Encountering a potent magical blight, or hostile, perhaps demonic, entities emerging from the desolate Grey Waste, these early Valyrians might have attempted to construct a barrier. The forts, not forming a continuous wall but rather a series of massive, strategically placed strongholds, could have been designed to project power, seal off specific incursion routes, or quarantine an area of intense, magical corruption. Sheer scale of the forts, each capable of housing 10,000 men, speaks to a threat of immense magnitude. Ultimately, the project may have proven too ambitious, the entities too formidable, or the region too remote and inhospitable for the Valyrians to maintain control, leading to its abandonment. The later Yetish civilization would then have inherited and repurposed these ancient, enigmatic structures. The Valyrians' unparalleled mastery of fire and earth magic makes their construction of such edifices plausible, even far from their heartland. The existence of such a monumental, perhaps failed, Valyrian project so far east would suggest a far greater global reach and a history of confronting diverse existential threats earlier than commonly recorded. This costly endeavor in the Grey Waste might even have influenced a subsequent inward focus of the Valyrian freehold, concentrating their power closer to home before their own eventual doom. The demons these forts were meant to contain could be linked to the very source of Valyria's power. Perhaps primordial entities related to fire and shadow, early uncontrolled experiments in blood magic, or wild magical forces that Valyria itself later managed to harness or was born from, making the 5 forts a forgotten monument to Valyria's own dangerous and obscure prehistory. As we contemplate these ancient barriers standing against forgotten terrors, we must wonder, what darkness did they truly contain, and does it still lurk beyond, waiting for the forts to crumble? Theory 2. The true purpose of the others. Not villains but guardians, restoring nature's broken balance. The others, White Walkers, are not inherently evil, but a natural or magically natural force seeking to restore a planetary balance disrupted by the rise of fire magic, particularly Valyrian dragon power, with the long night being a cyclical attempt to reclaim a world tilted too far towards fire. The others, or White Walkers, are often depicted as the ultimate evil, harbingers of an endless night seeking to extinguish all life. However, their ancient and cyclical appearances suggest a purpose more fundamental than simple malice. Consider the elemental dichotomy of ice and fire that underpins much of the world's mythology. This theory posits that the others are not a force of pure evil, but a natural or magically natural balancing mechanism. When the influence of fire, be it the literal flames of dragons, the spreading worship of R'hllor, or the metaphorical fire of unchecked human ambition and destructive magic, grows too potent, it disrupts a delicate cosmic or planetary equilibrium. The others, as agents of ice, then surge forth to restore this balance. The long night, therefore, is not an arbitrary apocalypse, but a recurring corrective event, an attempt to reclaim a world that has tilted too dangerously towards the dominion of fire. Their creation of whites might not be an act of defilement, but a method of reclaiming life for their side of the elemental equation, a counter to the life-giving and consuming properties of fire. Aegon the Conqueror's prophetic dream of a terrible darkness from the north might have been a vision of this cyclical rebalancing, a force that Targaryen fire and blood were, in a way, destined to oppose, thereby perpetuating the grand tragic struggle. This perspective reframes the others not as demonic entities, but as the personification of a fundamental cosmic principle. Their conflict with humanity, a clash of opposing, but not necessarily good versus evil, forces. The pact between the first, men and the children of the forest, beings aligned with natural and perhaps ice-based magic, could have been an earlier attempt to maintain this equilibrium. The others' resurgence might signify the ultimate failure of such pacts, as humanity, particularly with the advent of Valyrian power, tipped the scales too far, necessitating a more drastic intervention from the forces of cold. The Great Other, whose name is not to be spoken, might then be understood not as a conventional deity, but as the sentient embodiment of this ice principle, driven by an impersonal, almost geological imperative to preserve its existence against the encroachment of fire. Imagine then the long night not as the end of all things, but as the world holding its breath, waiting for balance to be restored once more. Theory 3. The doom of Valyria. Godhood attempt gone. Catastrophically wrong with apocalyptic results. The doom of Valyria was not a natural disaster or solely the result of the 14 flames erupting, but a catastrophic magical ritual enacted by rival Dragon Lord families attempting to achieve godhood or unparalleled power, which backfired with apocalyptic consequences. The cataclysm known as the Doom of Valyria, which obliterated the ancient freehold and reshaped a continent, is commonly attributed to a natural disaster, the simultaneous eruption of the 14 flames, or the failure of the spells that held these volcanic forces in check. However, the sheer scale and unnatural character of the doom hint at a cause rooted deeper in Valyria's defining traits, immense magical power, and the consuming ambition of its Dragon Lord families. Valyrian sorcery was intrinsically linked to fire and blood, and its ruling families, commanding dragons and wielding formidable magic, were engaged in constant, often lethal, rivalries. One theory suggests that feuding Dragon Lords assassinated so many of each other's fire mages that the spells controlling the volcanoes faltered. This theory expands upon that notion. The doom was not caused by mere neglect or attrition, but by a deliberate, competitive escalation of magical practice. It is conceivable that a dominant faction of dragon lords, or perhaps several rival houses, attempted a ritual of unprecedented magnitude. Their goal might have been apotheosis, an ascension to godhood, or the attainment of ultimate control over the elemental forces of the earth, perhaps to create even more powerful dragons or achieve a form of collective immortality. Such an endeavor would have involved delving too deep into forbidden magics, fueled by unimaginable quantities of blood sacrifice, likely drawn from the vast slave populations in the fiery mines. This colossal ritual, designed to grasp ultimate power, instead went catastrophically awry. Rather than achieving mastery, the Dragon Lords unleashed the full, uncontrollable fury of the 14 flames, triggering a magical chain reaction that tore the Valyrian Peninsula asunder. The description of every hill for 500 miles exploding simultaneously and red clouds raining down dragonglass speaks to an event far exceeding a typical volcanic catastrophe, suggesting a fundamental magical unraveling of reality itself. The Targaryens' survival, prompted by Daenerys the Dreamer's prophetic vision 12 years prior, might be attributed to their status as a relatively minor Dragon Lord house, perhaps deemed insignificant or choosing to abstain from these perilous, high-stakes magical endeavors that consume their more powerful contemporaries. The lingering magical pollution and the monstrous creatures said to inhabit the smoking sea and the ruins of Valyria could then be understood as the direct mutated remnants of this failed ascension, life and land warped by the uncontrolled, chaotic energies of a ritual that aimed for godhood but achieved only oblivion. As the night deepens, consider how the hubris of the Valyrians mirrors our own ambitions and how fine the line between transcendence and devastation truly is. Theory: Valyrian blood magic, the curse that still flows through noble veins across Essos, beyond the obvious Targaryen traits. Subtle vestiges of Valyrian blood magic and its inherent instability persist in various noble families of Essos who claim Valyrian descent in Volantis and Lys, manifesting as unusual talents, prophetic whispers, or a predisposition to ambition and ruthlessness, often with tragic consequences. While House Targaryen is the most prominent surviving legacy of Valyrian blood, the Freehold's influence extended far across Essos through its colonies. Though dragon-riding capabilities may have been lost to most, it is plausible that subtle yet potent vestiges of Valyrian blood magic persist within the lineages of those Essosi families who claim Valyrian ancestry. Volantis, the first daughter of Valyria, zealously guards its old blood, whose members rule from within the Black Wall, asserting an unbroken descent. Similarly, some Dragon Lords are known to have briefly survived the doom in cities like Lys and Tyrosh. These inheritors of Valyrian heritage might not display the overt traits of silver hair and purple eyes, though houses like Velaryon and Celtigar in Westeros, also of Valyrian stock, sometimes do. But the deeply ingrained fire and blood magic of their ancestors could manifest in more nuanced ways. Such traits might include an almost preternatural ambition and capacity for ruthlessness, reflecting the Dragon Lord's historical dominance. They might possess unusual talents, a captivating charm that borders on magical enthrallment, an intuitive grasp of manipulation, or a particular affinity for arcane arts or knowledge, as is sometimes whispered of Lysene courtesans and poisoners. Faint prophetic echoes, not the full dragon dreams of the Targaryens, but unsettling intuitions or symbolically rich ordinary dreams, might surface. Conversely, a predisposition to melancholy, intense passions, or even madness, akin to the Targaryen taint, could also be a lingering effect of this potent bloodline. The half-human monsters allegedly created by Valyrian blood mages represent the horrifying extreme of such practices. But a diluted magical inheritance could result in more subtle, inheritable psychological or physiological quirks. The tragedy for these descendants is that such traits, divorced from the cultural context and established magical disciplines of old Valyria, might lead to personal instability or make them targets for exploitation, unknowing carriers of a powerful, volatile, and often sorrowful legacy. The rigid adherence to blood purity by groups like the Old Blood of Volantis, even if they claim descent from common soldiers rather than dragon lords, might be an unconscious societal attempt to preserve a fragment of this power they no longer fully comprehend. A cultural memory of Valyrian supremacy driven by a now subconscious magical imperative. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine these ancient bloodlines flowing through generations, carrying whispers of a forgotten magic, and the price that comes with such power. Theory 5. The Night's King, the forbidden Stark romance that nearly doomed the North forever. The legendary Night's King was indeed a Stark, perhaps even a Brandon, whose forbidden love for a female other was not a simple romance, but a pact, an attempt to bridge the divide between humans and others, which tragically led to his own corruption and reign of terror. The chilling legend of the Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch who fell from grace, resonates with a particular dread in the North. Old Nan's tales, often dismissed as fireside fancy, insisted that this fallen commander was no mere man, but a Stark of Winterfell, possibly named Brandon, and brother to Brandon the Breaker, who ultimately overthrew him. The legend recounts his capture by love for a woman with skin white as the moon and eyes like blue stars, her skin cold as ice, unmistakably another, or a being intimately connected to them. He brought her to the Night Fort, declared her his queen, and himself her king, ruling for 13 years through dark sorcery and making sacrifices to the others. This theory proposes that this union was far more than a simple, albeit forbidden, romance. It may have been a deliberate pact, an audacious attempt by a Stark, a lineage with ancient ties to the North's primal magic, to broker some form of understanding or coexistence with the others. The sacrifices might have initially been offerings or exchanges within this pact, not inherently malevolent in their original intent. However, the power derived from this connection and the profound influence of his other queen gradually warped his purpose, twisting a potential diplomatic endeavor into a reign of terror. His Stark blood, with its potential for warging or greenseeing, might have uniquely equipped him to communicate or bond with these enigmatic beings, but also rendered him exceptionally vulnerable to their chilling magic and alien consciousness. The horrific atrocities that followed were the bitter fruit of this failed pact, his humanity eroded by the very forces he sought to engage. The subsequent erasure of his name and records might not only have been to hide a shameful past, but also to obliterate dangerous knowledge of the specific sorcery or rituals he employed, lest others be tempted to follow his dark path. This narrative transforms the Night's King from a simple monster into a tragic Stark figure, a poignant warning about the perilous allure of the North's deepest magic. As you rest beneath your own furs on this quiet night, imagine this forgotten Stark reaching across an impossible divide and the terrible price he paid for his ambition. Theory 6. The Durrandon's Fall, the century-long political isolation that doomed the Storm Kings. The fall of Argilac, the arrogant and House Durrandon, was not solely due to Aegon's dragons, but also a consequence of centuries of shifting alliances and bitter rivalries with the Reach, Dawn, and the Ironborn, which left the Storm Kings increasingly isolated and vulnerable when the Conqueror arrived. The dramatic fall of Argilac the Third. Arrogant, the last Storm King of House Durrandon, in the face of Aegon Targaryen's conquest, is often attributed solely to the overwhelming power of dragons. However, the roots of his doom were deeply embedded in centuries of pre-conquest politics that had left his kingdom strategically exhausted and increasingly isolated. While the Storm Kings once commanded a vast territory, their power had been steadily eroded by relentless pressure from all sides. The kings of the Reach from House Gardener encroached upon their western domains. Dornishmen posed a constant threat to the south, frequently raiding the marches, and to the north, the kings of the Isles and the rivers, particularly House Hoare, had seized valuable lands, including territories the Durandons once controlled. In the Riverlands, Argilac's clumsy offer to Aegon, the hand of his daughter Argella, along with lands already lost to Harren the Black, was an act of desperation, a clear indication of his weakened position as he sought an ally against the formidable Hoares. When Aegon countered with demands for Durandon territory and offered his general Orys Baratheon for Argella, Argilac's infamous pride led him to a fatal miscalculation, mutilating Aegon's envoy and inviting war. At this juncture, the Stormlands were already beset by pirates and Dornish raiders. Argilac could call upon no powerful, reliable allies, for past centuries of warfare had turned potential friends into bitter rivals or subjugated peoples. His bannermen, though they fought valiantly in the last storm, likely served a kingdom, weary of perpetual conflict. Thus, while Argilac's arrogance provided the spark, the long-term geopolitical isolation and strategic depletion of the Stormlands created the tinder for their swift conflagration under Dragonfire. Orys Baratheon's subsequent marriage to Argella and adoption of the Durandon sigil and words was a politically astute move, facilitating the acceptance of new rule by a war-weary Stormlord nobility who saw in this union a measure of continuity and the promise of stability under the new Targaryen regime. The fall of the Storm Kings reminds us that no matter how ancient or proud a house may be, isolation can be a deadlier enemy than any dragon. Theory 7. The Grey Stark's Rebellion, the forgotten warning that haunts every Stark to this day. The extinct House Greystark, a cadet branch of House Stark, didn't just rebel alongside the Boltons. Their ambition mirrored early Targaryen desires for supremacy, and their complete destruction served as a chilling, internalized warning within House Stark against hubris and division. Among the forgotten annals of the North lies the tale of House Greystark, a cadet branch of the Starks of Winterfell who held the strategic castle of Wolf's Den for 5 centuries. Their eventual rebellion, in league with House Bolton against their Stark overlords, led to their utter annihilation. This theory suggests that the Greystark's motivations ran deeper than simple vassal discontent or alliance with the ambitious Boltons. As a long-established and powerful offshoot of the ruling Stark line, controlling a key northern port and fortress, the Greystarks may have come to see themselves as equals, or perhaps even rightful inheritors, of the North. Their ambition could have mirrored, on a regional scale, the kind of dynastic aspirations that fueled conflicts like the Blackfire rebellions against the Targaryens. They might have perceived a weakness or stagnation in the main Stark line and sought to supplant them, using the Boltons as convenient, if treacherous, allies in a bid for ultimate northern supremacy. The response from Winterfell, the complete eradication of a house of their own blood, was not merely a punishment for treason, but a brutal and unequivocal statement against internal division and excessive ambition. The memory of the Greystark's fall, even if not commonly spoken of outside the North, would have served as a potent, internalized warning within House Stark itself, contributing to their later emphasis on family unity and perhaps fostering a suspicion of overt political maneuvering that left them somewhat ill-prepared for the subtle, venomous games of the South. The Wolf's Den itself, passing through many hands after the Greystark's demise, became a tangible symbol of broken power and the dire consequences of challenging the authority of Winterfell, its long and bloody history a constant, silent admonition to all northern houses. As snow blankets the land in your imagination, consider how this long-forgotten tragedy might have shaped the Stark words. Winter is coming. Not just a warning about the season, but about the price of division when the cold winds rise. Theory 8. The Rain-Tarbeck Rebellion, the fatal miscalculation that created the Tywin Lannister we fear. The Rain-Tarbeck Rebellion was not merely about unpaid debts, but a tragic culmination of generations of Rain pride, their perception of Lannister weakness under Tytos, and a fatal underestimation of Tywin Lannister's ruthless resolve to restore his family's dominance. The Rain-Tarbeck Rebellion, immortalized in the chilling verses of the Rains of Castamere, was far more than a simple dispute over unpaid loans. It was a tragedy born of deep-seated pride and a fatal miscalculation of Lannister fortitude. House Rain of Castamere, an ancient and powerful family, boasted wealth from their mines that rivaled even that of Casterly Rock, fostering a sense of near equality and potent ambition. This ambition was vividly displayed during Lady Ellen Rain's tenure at the Rock, where she leveraged her marriage to Tyon Lannister to significantly enrich her own kin, creating a reign of the Rains within the Lannister court. Under the subsequent, weak and overly conciliatory rule of Lord Tytos Lannister, Houses Rain and Tarbeck flourished, extracting vast sums of gold and acting with increasing impunity, likely viewing Tytus's leniency not as generosity, but as a sign of irreversible Lannister decline. When Tytos's son, Sir Tywin Lannister, returned from the Stepstones and demanded repayment, Lord Roger Rain reportedly laughed, instructing his vassals to ignore the demand. This was not initially a bid to seize Casterly Rock itself, but an assertion of their autonomy and a belief that the Lannisters, particularly the young Tywin, lacked the will or power to enforce their authority. The Rains and Tarbecks likely aimed to solidify their position as the dominant power block in the Westerlands, perhaps envisioning a future where they openly overshadowed their Lannister liege lords. Their fatal error was in mistaking Tytos's feebleness for a permanent decay of Lannister strength and in failing to comprehend the iron will of Tywin. For Tywin, this was not merely about reclaiming debts. It was about eradicating a dangerous challenge to Lannister supremacy and demonstrating with brutal finality the consequences of such defiance. This rebellion became a crucible for Tywin, shaping his conviction that only absolute ruthlessness could guarantee his house's preeminence. The very silence in historical records regarding the rebellion's details, beyond the grim song, speaks to the totality of Tywin's victory and the fear he instilled, effectively ensuring that the only narrative remembered was the one that served as a stark warning. The haunting melody of the Rains of Castamere follows us through the night, a reminder that sometimes the most terrible transformations come not from magic or prophecy, but from wounded pride and the desire for respect. Theory 9. The Defiance of Duskendale, the Myrish conspiracy that drove King Aerys to madness. Lady Sarala of Mere, the Lace Serpent, was not merely a foreign wife who misguided her husband, Lord Dennis Darklyn, but a politically astute player from the Free Cities who saw Duskendale's decline as an opportunity to carve out a powerful, semi-independent port city, using her husband's ambition as a pawn in a larger Myrish-style game of influence. The Defiance of Duskendale, a pivotal event in the reign of Aerys II Targaryen, is often attributed to the folly of Lord Dennis Darklyn, allegedly manipulated by his Myrish wife, Sarala, dubbed the Lace Serpent. While Lord Dennis was undoubtedly ambitious, frustrated by Duskendale's dwindling trade in the shadow of King's Landing, and eager for a new charter to restore its prominence, Sarala's role may have been far more calculated than mere spousal influence. Hailing from Mere, a free city renowned for its intricate politics, mercantile acumen, and often subtle power plays, Lady Sarala likely possessed a sophisticated understanding of statecraft and economic leverage. She might have perceived in Aerys's burgeoning madness and his strained relationship with his hand, Tywin Lannister, a unique opportunity. Her objective, therefore, may not have been simply to secure a favorable charter for her husband, but to transform Duskendale into a powerful, semi-autonomous trading hub, perhaps with stronger commercial ties to Myr and other free cities, effectively challenging King's Landing's dominance on the Blackwater Bay. The epithet lace serpent could signify not just seductive charm, but the complex, insidious weaving of political plots characteristic of Westerosi intrigue. The Myrish poison she was accused of administering might have been shrewd, Machiavellian counsel that Lord Dennis, in his eagerness, readily consumed. The exceptionally brutal nature of her execution, her tongue and female organs reportedly removed before she was burned alive, suggests that Aerys and his court perceived her as a threat far exceeding that of a misguided lord's consort. She was seen as a dangerous foreign instigator, a player in a game whose rules Westeros found alien and terrifying. Her actions, if driven by a desire to elevate Duskendale as an Essos-linked power, could represent an early, albeit failed, attempt by Free City interests to gain significant political and economic leverage within the Seven Kingdoms, foreshadowing the later, more overt interventions by entities like the Iron Bank or figures such as Illyrio Mopatis. The specific targeting of her means of communication and perceived sexual manipulation in her execution also hints at a deep-seated Westerosi xenophobia and fear of foreign female influence, particularly from the decadent free cities. As we drift deeper into the night, consider how this brief rebellion forever altered the course of the Seven Kingdoms, planting the seeds of paranoia that would bloom into the Mad King's reign of terror. Theory 10. The Red Comet. The celestial mirror that reveals your deepest fears and desires. The Red Comet was not a singular omen with one true meaning, dragons, war, etc., but a powerful celestial Rorschach test, its interpretation varying wildly because it magically amplified and reflected the deepest hopes, fears, and obsessions of those who beheld it, making all interpretations subjectively true for the individual. The appearance of the Red Comet in the skies above Westeros and Essos was met with a bewildering array of interpretations. It was dubbed Mormont's Torch by the Night's Watch, King Joffrey's Comet by loyalists in King's Landing, the Dragon's Tail by others, and seen as a harbinger of war, a sign of dragons, a call for vengeance for Eddard Stark, or a divine message from various gods. Osha, the wildling, declared, "Stars don't fall for men," yet immediately followed with, "A red comet means one thing, boy, dragons." This theory proposes that the comet was not a passive celestial body carrying a single, objective omen, but an active magical phenomenon. It did not transmit a singular message. Rather, it acted as a cosmic mirror, magically amplifying and reflecting the deepest hopes, fears, and prevailing obsessions of those who witnessed it. For Daenerys Targaryen, on the cusp of birthing her dragons and embracing her destiny, it was a herald of her coming, a divine guide. For Catelyn Stark, consumed by fear of Lannister power, its crimson hue mirrored their sigil. For those like Melisandre, fanatically devoted to Stannis Baratheon as Azor Ahai reborn, the comet was irrefutable proof of his prophesied return. The Thaidam magic of the Red Comet therefore lay in its capacity to tap into the observer's subconscious, transforming their interpretation into a profound revelation of their own inner state. In this light, all interpretations were subjectively true for the individual experiencing them. The comet became a celestial Rorschach test, revealing not a fixed future, but the myriad anxieties, ambitions, and fervent beliefs swirling in the hearts of mortals during a period of profound upheaval and nascent magical resurgence. The comet's arrival, coinciding precisely with the rebirth of dragons, suggests that its reflective magical property might be intrinsically linked to this waxing of magic in the world. As dragons returned, the veil between the mundane and the magical thinned, and celestial events became imbued with a greater, more personal, and psychologically potent resonance, turning the comet into a mirror not just for individuals, but for a world reawakening to the power of belief and portent. As the night deepens around you, imagine what the red comet might reveal about your own heart's desires, were it to blaze across your sky. Theory 11. Azor Ahai's Lightbringer. The Night's Watch's collective sacrifice is the true flaming sword, the prophecy of Azor Ahai and the forging of Lightbringer is not about a single hero or a literal sword, but an allegory for the enduring collective sacrifice of the Night's Watch, with Nissa Nissa representing the personal lives and loves forsaken by its members. The ancient prophecy of Azor Ahai speaks of a hero who will combat darkness, wielding a burning sword named Lightbringer, forged through immense personal sacrifice. The legend details 3 attempts to create this blade. The first, tempered in water, shattered. The second, tempered in the heart of a lion, also broke. The third, and successful, forging required Azor Ahai to plunge the sword into the heart of his beloved wife, Nissa Nissa, her soul merging with the steel. This theory proposes a symbolic interpretation. Azor Ahai is not a singular individual, but the institution of the Night's Watch itself. Lightbringer, then, is not a physical weapon, but the unwavering collective vigilance and dedication of the Sworn Brothers. The sacrifice of Nissa Nissa is a potent metaphor for the profound vows each member undertakes. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. In these vows, the men of the Night's Watch forsake personal love, family ambition, and worldly identity, all that is held dear, to temper the spiritual blade that guards the realms of men against the long night. Each generation of brothers reenacts this sacrifice, their collective souls and commitment forming the enduring strength of this Lightbringer. The long night they battle is not merely a singular past or future event, but the ever-present threat of oblivion. This understanding transforms the prophecy from a tale of a lone chosen one into a testament to continuous communal heroism and the tragic, often anonymous sacrifice of countless individuals. If the Night's Watch embodies Azor Ahai, its dwindling numbers and waning prestige in the current era signify a Lightbringer grown dim, making the realm more vulnerable and necessitating a profound reforging through new, perhaps even greater, collective sacrifices. This shifts the narrative from awaiting a hero to recognizing the shared burden of vigilance. As your consciousness begins to drift, consider the quiet heroism of those who stand guard against the darkness, not with blazing swords, but with the steady flame of duty and sacrifice. Theory 12. The Stallion Who Mounts the World. Daenerys' dragons are the true prophesied conqueror. The Dothraki prophecy of the stallion who mounts the world did not refer to Rhaego, nor solely to Daenerys, but to her 3 dragons as a collective entity, a force that would trample the old world to make way for a new, uncertain dawn, embodying both creation and destruction. The Dothraki prophecy of the stallion who mounts the world, delivered by the crones of the Dosh Khaleen, foretold a great Khal who would unite the Dothraki and ride to the ends of the earth, a figure of immense power. The stillbirth of Daenerys' son, Rhaego, seemingly rendered this prophecy void, while many interpretations then shifted to Daenerys herself, suggesting the patriarchal Dothraki culture simply could not envision a woman in such a role. A deeper layer of meaning may lie with her dragons. It is plausible that Rhaego's life force was part of the blood magic that hatched the dragon eggs. Thus, the prophecy might not refer to a single human, but to Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion as a collective entity, a tripartite stallion. This interpretation sees the dragons not merely as Daenerys' mounts, but as the embodiment of the world-altering force itself. The prophecy's descriptions: his enemies will tremble before him, and their wives will weep tears of blood, aptly describe the terror and devastation wrought by dragonfire. The Khalasar covers the earth can be understood metaphorically as the dragon's global impact, their ability to project power across continents and reshape the known world. They are the engine of Daenerys' conquests, but also a power that, once unleashed, possesses its own terrifying momentum. They mount the world by incinerating old orders, shattering armies, and heralding the dramatic return of magic, acting as a singular cataclysmic force of destructive rebirth. The inherent tragedy is that this force, while a tool for liberation in Daenerys' eyes, is also an instrument of immense suffering, a power that inherently resists absolute control, foreshadowing the difficulty any single rider, even their mother, would face in truly mastering such elemental beings. This interpretation also connects the Dothraki prophecy to deeper Valyrian magical principles, suggesting the crones unknowingly tapped into the significance of blood sacrifice in the birth of world-changing power. The night grows deeper as you contemplate these creatures of fire and blood, neither fully beast nor magic, but something more primal, a force of nature cloaked in scales and flame. Theory 13. The Valonqar Prophecy. How Cersei's fear created the very monster she dreaded. Maggie the Frog's prophecy that a Valonqar, little brother, would kill Cersei was not a fixed destiny, but a psychological catalyst that drove Cersei's own paranoia and destructive actions, ultimately ensuring her downfall through the very brothers she feared and alienated. Maggie the Frog's chilling prophecy to a young Cersei Lannister included the ominous words, "And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you." Valonqar in High Valyrian means little brother. Cersei, already harboring a deep-seated animosity towards Tyrion, whom she blamed for their mother's death, immediately fixed upon him as the agent of her doom. This conviction became a corrosive force in her life, shaping her every interaction with Tyrion and fueling her relentless persecution of him. Her accusations against him following Joffrey's death and her subsequent efforts to have him killed directly led to Tyrion's alliance with Daenerys Targaryen, a path that culminated in the Siege of King's Landing and Cersei's own demise in the show's continuity. Simultaneously, Cersei's escalating paranoia, her insatiable thirst for power, and her increasingly cruel and self-destructive acts, such as the annihilation of the Great Sept of Baelor, eroded the love and loyalty of Jaime, her twin and also, technically, her younger brother. The prophecy thus functioned as a tragic self-fulfilling mechanism. Cersei's fear of it and her interpretation of it drove her to actions that alienated and weaponized the very individuals she suspected. Her tears were not only for the loss of her children, as foretold, but also tears of rage and helplessness as her own choices paved the road to her destruction. The choking could be literal, or it could be a metaphor for her life and power being extinguished by the consequences of the actions she took against her brothers, actions born from the prophecy's poisonous seed. The true power of the prophecy, then, lay not in its magical certainty, but in its insidious exploitation of Cersei's inherent narcissism and profound inability to trust, transforming a cryptic warning into the blueprint for her ruin. The ambiguity of Valonqar, which could refer to any little brother, not exclusively hers, was lost on Cersei, whose narrow, paranoid interpretation blinded her to the complex ways in which her fate would unravel. As sleep begins to claim your consciousness, reflect on how our deepest fears can become self-fulfilling prophecies, weaving traps of our own making that we cannot escape. Theory 14. Weirwood Dreams. Ancient Stark ancestors guide the living through psychic tree network. Weirwood dreams are not just random visions or messages from generic old gods, but are often direct, though fragmented communications or memories from the consciousness of deceased Stark ancestors, especially greenseers, embedded within the Weirwood network, attempting to guide their living descendants. The ancient weirwood trees with their carved, weeping faces are the sacred heart of the old gods' worship, and through them, green seers like Bran Stark can witness the past and touch the present. It is suggested that the old gods are not distant deities, but the collective consciousness of generations of deceased children of the forest and first men, green seers, whose spirits have become part of the vast weirwood network. This theory focuses specifically on the Stark lineage. Given their deep First Men ancestry and unwavering adherence to the old gods, it is highly probable that many Starks throughout history possessed warging or green-seeing abilities. Upon their deaths, particularly if they were powerful green-seers or died in proximity to a heart tree, their consciousness, or significant echoes of it, may have joined this timeless weirwood collective. Consequently, the vivid, often prophetic dreams experienced by Stark characters, such as Bran's far-seeing visions or Jon's unsettling dreams of the Winterfell crypts, are not merely random psychic phenomena or messages from an amorphous divine entity. Instead, they could be direct, albeit fragmented and symbolically veiled, communications or memories from these Stark ancestors. Ned Stark's poignant dream of Lyanna in the crypts, whispering, "Promise me, Ned," as her statue wept blood, might be her lingering consciousness or a powerful memory imprinted within Winterfell's ancient magic reaching out to him. These ancestral Starks, existing within the Weirwood net, may attempt to impart crucial warnings, guidance, or forgotten truths to their living descendants. The messages are often cryptic, filtered through the dreamer's own psyche and experiences, which accounts for their symbolic and sometimes confusing nature. The Stark family words, "Winter is coming," could thus be more than a mere motto. They might be an ancestral reminder, a deep, psychic echo passed down through generations via this weirwood connection, a constant whisper from the past about the cyclical threat of the long night and the Stark's enduring role in confronting it. It is also conceivable that the wolf blood or perceived madness in some Starks could, in certain instances, be the result of overwhelming or conflicting visions and influences from this ancestral network, particularly if an individual possessed latent green-seer sensitivity without the training to process such profound and often disturbing input. As your mind wanders through forests of white trees with blood-red leaves, imagine countless Stark voices whispering across time, their knowledge preserved in living wood, their warnings carried on rustling leaves. Theory 15. Targaryen Dragon Dreams, the prophetic gift that drove dragon lords to madness. The Targaryen gift of prophetic dragon dreams, while sometimes beneficial, was also a significant contributor to the infamous Targaryen madness, as the weight of unclear visions, the pressure to interpret them correctly, and the often tragic nature of their fulfillments eroded the sanity of many in the bloodline. The blood of old Valyria bestowed upon House Targaryen the enigmatic gift of dragon dreams, prophetic visions that could foresee future events. Indeed, it was Daenerys the Dreamer's foresight that saved the Targaryens from the doom of Valyria. Yet this extraordinary ability may have been a poisoned chalice, for it is suggested that these very dreams could also try the sanity of the dreamer. The burden of such visions was likely immense. Prophecies are notoriously ambiguous, and the pressure to interpret them correctly, knowing that the fate of their house or even the realm might depend on it, could be crushing. Misinterpretations could lead, and likely often did, to disastrous actions. Constantly glimpsing potential futures, especially those filled with tragedy or demanding terrible choices, could foster a deep-seated fatalism or an acute paranoia. driving a Targaryen to desperate measures to either avert or fulfill a prophecy, often with catastrophic results. Rhaegar's obsession with the prince that was promised serves as a poignant example. The unique and often terrifying nature of these visions could also lead to profound isolation. The infamous madness of Aerion Brightflame, who perished consuming wildfire in the belief it would transform him into a dragon, starkly illustrates how the yearning for dragons, possibly fueled by misinterpreted visions, could lead to ultimate self-destruction. Even Daenerys Targaryen, upon learning of her family's taint and experiencing Quaith's cryptic pronouncements, begins to question her own sanity. The old adage that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin, for Targaryens might directly correlate to how an individual processed their dragon dreams, wisdom leading to greatness, obsession to madness. The Targaryen practice of incestuous marriage, intended to keep the bloodline pure, may have intensified this predisposition to both prophetic insight and mental instability. It is conceivable that as overt magic and the dragons themselves waned from the world, the context for understanding and managing these raw, powerful visions diminished, leaving later Targaryens more vulnerable to their overwhelming and destabilizing influence. Furthermore, if institutions like the Citadel actively sought to suppress magical knowledge, they might have inadvertently contributed to this vulnerability by denying Targaryens access to any historical or scholarly frameworks for comprehending their unique and perilous gift. The night grows deeper still as you contemplate the price of foresight, how seeing the future might fracture the mind, leaving even the mightiest dragon lords lost in a labyrinth of possible tomorrows. Theory 16. Varys the Secret Targaryen. The spider's concealed dragon blood drives his master plan. Varys is not merely a cunning spy master, but a descendant of House Targaryen, possibly through Aerion Brightflame's line, and his lifelong manipulations aim to restore a vision of Targaryen rule, or at least avenge its downfall, explaining his enigmatic motives and deep-seated plans. The origins of Varys, the enigmatic master of whisperers, are deliberately obscured, yet compelling theories suggest a lineage far grander and more tragic than that of a common-born eunuch. One prominent theory posits that Varys is a descendant of House Targaryen, specifically through the line of Aerion Brightflame, the prince known for his cruelty and madness who died after drinking wildfire. Aerion was exiled to Lys and was known to have fathered bastards there. His son Maegor's fate remains a historical blank, a void into which Varys' timeline could neatly fit. Varys' customary shaven head, often described as bold as an egg, may serve to conceal the silver-gold hair and violet eyes characteristic of Valyrian blood, a practice reminiscent of Aegon Viv Targaryen, Egg, who shaved his head to hide his royal features while traveling incognito. His long-standing alliance with Illyrio Mopatis and their meticulous grooming of young Griff, presented as Aegon VI Targaryen, take on a deeper significance if Varys has a personal familial stake in Targaryen restoration. His actions throughout the saga, often sowing chaos yet subtly steering events toward a Targaryen resurgence, could be interpreted not merely as a Game of Thrones, but as a desperate lifelong quest to reclaim a lost heritage or avenge its ruin. His profound understanding of power dynamics and succession laws also hints at an upbringing or education far beyond that of a mere spy. If Varys is indeed a bright flame, his awareness of the Targaryen madness that afflicted his ancestor Aerion would be intensely personal. This could explain his meticulous search for a perfect prince in Aegon, perhaps an attempt to cultivate a Targaryen ruler free from this hereditary taint, or one he believes he can guide away from such an end. His network of little birds and mastery of secrets could then be seen as a non-magical counterpart to the Targaryen reliance on dragon dreams, a self-made apparatus for acquiring the hidden knowledge necessary to navigate and manipulate the treacherous currents of power. As sleep begins to claim you, imagine the spider at the center of his vast web, a hidden dragon weaving decades-long schemes, his true face concealed even from those who believe they know him best. Theory 17. The Myrish Conspiracy. How foreign powers manipulate Westeros through subtle infiltration. Lady Sarala of Myr, the Lace Serpent, was not merely a foreign wife who misguided her husband, Lord Dennis Darklyn, but a politically astute player from the Free Cities who saw Duskendale's decline as an opportunity to carve out a powerful, semi-independent port city, using her husband's ambition as a pawn in a larger Myrish-style game of influence. The defiance of Duskendale, a pivotal event in the reign of Aerys the Tune Targaryen, is often attributed to the folly of Lord Dennis Darklyn, allegedly manipulated by his Myrish wife, Sarala, dubbed the Lace Serpent. While Lord Dennis was undoubtedly ambitious, frustrated by Duskendale's dwindling trade in the shadow of King's Landing and eager for a new charter to restore its prominence, Sarala's role may have been far more calculated than mere spousal influence. Hailing from Myr, a free city renowned for its intricate politics, mercantile acumen, and often subtle power plays, Lady Sarala likely possessed a sophisticated understanding of statecraft and economic leverage. She might have perceived in Aerys's burgeoning madness and his strained relationship with his hand, Tywin Lannister, a unique opportunity. Her objective, therefore, may not have been simply to secure a favorable charter for her husband, but to transform Duskendale into a powerful, semi-autonomous trading hub, perhaps with stronger commercial ties to Myr and other free cities, effectively challenging King's Landing's dominance on the Blackwater Bay. The epithet Lace Serpent could signify not just seductive charm, but the complex, insidious weaving of political plots characteristic of Westerosi intrigue. The Myrish poison she was accused of administering might have been shrewd Machiavellian counsel that Lord Dennis, in his eagerness, readily consumed. The exceptionally brutal nature of her execution, her tongue and female organs reportedly removed before she was burned alive, suggests that Aerys and his court perceived her as a threat far exceeding that of a misguided lord's consort. She was seen as a dangerous foreign instigator, a player in a game whose rules Westeros found alien and terrifying. Her actions, if driven by a desire to elevate Duskendale as an Essos-linked power, could represent an early, albeit failed, attempt by Free City interests to gain significant political and economic leverage within the Seven Kingdoms, foreshadowing the later, more overt interventions by entities like the Iron Bank or figures such as Illyrio Mopatis. The specific targeting of her means of communication and perceived sexual manipulation in her execution also hints at a deep-seated Westerosi xenophobia and fear of foreign female influence, particularly from the decadent free cities. Your thoughts grow hazier, yet you wonder if other foreign powers continue to manipulate Westeros from the shadows, their agents moving unseen through courts and councils, playing a game far more subtle than the obvious clash of swords and banners. Theory 18. Rhaegar's victory. The shocking truth about how winning the Trident would have doomed the realm. Had Rhaegar Targaryen slain Robert Baratheon at the Trident, his victory would not have brought peace, but rather a more fractured and protracted conflict, potentially leading to multiple civil wars, and the Targaryen dynasty's swifter, more agonizing collapse. Rhaegar Targaryen's triumph over Robert Baratheon at the Battle of the Trident, a victory many loyalists might have prayed for, would likely have plunged the Seven Kingdoms into an even deeper abyss of chaos. The immediate aftermath would present Rhaegar with a hydra of challenges. His father, the Mad King Aerys II, would remain on the Iron Throne, a volatile and paranoid ruler Rhaegar himself intended to depose. Such an act, kinslaying and kingslaying combined, would inevitably divide the realm, potentially igniting a war between Targaryen factions. Furthermore, the surviving rebel lords, Ned Stark, Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully, and Stannis Baratheon, would scarcely lay down their arms. Stannis might well have been crowned the new rebel king, continuing the fight in Robert's name. Amidst this turmoil, Tywin Lannister, ever the opportunist and nursing his own grievances against Aerys, would remain a formidable and unpredictable force, his allegiance shifting to whomever could best serve the interests of Casterly Rock. The most devastating schism, however, would arise from Rhaegar's own lineage. The revelation of Jon Snow's parentage, born of Lyanna Stark, and the implications of Rhaegar's annulment of his marriage to Elia Martell, or a claim of polygamy, would create an intractable succession crisis. Dorne would undoubtedly champion the rights of Elia's son, Aegon, leading to a bitter conflict against any claim made for Jon. The realm could have fractured into numerous warring factions. Rhaegar's loyalists against Aerys's, the Crown against the unyielding rebels, and Targaryen against Targaryen, with the faith potentially condemning Rhaegar's marital choices. This scenario paints a grim picture of a Westeros torn asunder by multiple, simultaneous civil wars. A Targaryen dynasty consuming itself in fire and blood, perhaps leading to an even swifter and more brutal end than the one history recorded. Such prolonged and widespread devastation might have left the Seven Kingdoms utterly defenseless against ancient threats stirring in the far north, the realm too preoccupied with its internal bleeding to notice the true long night descending. Lyanna Stark's survival in this timeline, far from being a romantic resolution, could have become a focal point for dissent and political poison. Her presence a constant reminder of Rhaegar's perceived wrongs against Dorne, making her a target and a symbol of the realm's division. As your consciousness drifts towards sleep, imagine the Silver Prince standing victorious at the Trident, unaware that his triumph would usher in not peace, but a storm more terrible than any that came before. Theory 19. Ned Stark's refusal. How staying in Winterfell would have left the North defenseless. Had Ned Stark refused Robert's offer to become Hand of the King, the North might have remained stable for a time. But this isolation would have left the Starks unprepared and ultimately more vulnerable to the machinations of the South and the true threat from beyond the Wall. Eddard Stark's refusal to accept King Robert Baratheon's offer of the Handship would have on its surface seemed a prudent choice for House Stark in the North. Winterfell would have remained a haven of relative peace, its lord present and its children safe from the intrigues of King's Landing. Yet, this isolation would carry a hidden, perhaps fatal cost. Robert Baratheon's demise, likely hastened by Cersei Lannister's machinations or his own recklessness, would still occur. In Ned's absence, Tywin Lannister might well have become Hand, consolidating Lannister power far more effectively and ruthlessly. Without Ned's investigation into the legitimacy of Robert's children, Stannis Baratheon's claim to the throne would lack crucial corroboration, potentially failing to gain significant support and altering the nature of any subsequent war of succession. The master manipulators, Littlefinger and Varys, would undoubtedly continue their efforts to destabilize the realm, finding other pawns to achieve their clandestine goals. The North, cocooned in its isolation, would remain dangerously uninformed about the true political currents and the resurgence of ancient magic. When the existential threat of the others eventually materialized, an isolated Winterfell, lacking the southern intelligence and potential alliances forged through Ned's painful tenure as Hand, would be ill-equipped to rally a unified defense. The Starks, though initially secure, might find themselves blindsided by a different, perhaps more insidious, series of conflicts, or by the inexorable advance of the White Walkers, without the bitter lessons that, in the known timeline, ultimately helped prepare some for the true long night. This path of refusal might have led to a more powerful and unopposed Lannister regime, which, while perhaps brutally efficient against certain threats, would have built its dominion on injustice. Furthermore, Jon Snow's destiny could have been irrevocably altered without the catalysts that led him to the Night's Watch. The figure many believe pivotal to the fight against the others might never have risen to prominence, potentially dooming the realm. Your mind grows heavier, thoughts slowing like honey. In winter, as you consider how even the noblest intentions to protect one's family, to remain loyal to one's home, might lead unwittingly to greater peril. As our journey through the shadowed theories and whispered secrets of Westeros and Essos comes to a close, we are left not with certainties, but with possibilities, the endless patterns that might be discerned in the tapestry of ice and fire. The ancient foundations of this world, its magic, its balance of primal forces, its cataclysms, continue to echo through time, shaping the rise and fall of kingdoms, the fulfillment of prophecies, and the destinies of those who walk its soil. From the mysterious 5 forts in distant Essos to the subtle manipulations of spy masters in King's Landing, from the sacrifices of the Night's Watch to the dragon dreams that haunt Targaryen blood, we have glimpsed the countless threads that weave together to form this world's song. Perhaps the true beauty of these theories lies not in their absolute truth or falsehood, but in how they invite us to look deeper, to see patterns where others see only chaos, to find meaning in the seemingly random cruelties and kindnesses that befall the inhabitants of this realm. Like the green seers gazing through the eyes of weirwoods, we glimpse fragments of possibility, echoes of what was, and whispers of what might be. As sleep claims you at last, remember that in the world of ice and fire, as in our own dreams, truth is rarely pure and never simple. The most compelling stories are those that remain partially veiled, inviting us to return again and again to their mysteries, finding new meanings with each visit. Let the gentle darkness take you now, and may your own dreams be as rich and strange as those we've shared tonight, filled with dragons and direwolves, white walkers and weirwoods, prophecies and their unexpected fulfillments. Good night, and remember, the night is dark and full of terrors, but dreams are full of wonders.